So welcome to the week 9.2 video tutorial, and this is going to walk through a random looper using the groove tilde object and being able to basically jump into little fragments of a recorded passage. This patch is a little big here for the video window, so I will be scrolling around a little bit. So first of all, I need to record sample, and I've got a record tilde test. The buffer is called test, and there's the buffer. The buffer is set up to be 10,000 milliseconds long in 2 channels. And probably, since I only have one microphone, I should connect both channels into the same microphone. Secondly, I have this object, which you haven't come across before. This is a waveform object, and this waveform will allow me to display a waveform, one of the channels of a waveform, so I can actually see it on screen, and it will allow me to set loop points in that waveform. So let's record 10 seconds of sound to start with. Okay, so I'm going to record 10 seconds of absolutely incredibly fascinating information. And there's my recording. When I double click on my buffer, you can see I actually only recorded 8 seconds. Maybe I'll do it again. Doesn't matter. In order to display that buffer, I'm going to pass a message into this waveform tilde. By the way, I'm just going to type it so you can see. It's called waveform tilde. I hit return, and it comes up as a rectangle. I'm going to hit the set test 1, which basically means set this waveform tilde object to display the buffer test in channel 1 as such. And there we can actually see it. Now, a waveform tilde object can your interface to it can be set to do a number of things. Right now, this one is set so that I can go in and select portions of the waveform. Right? So I could be setting loop points, for example, and the 3rd and 4th outlets of the waveform tilde object are connected into my groove object. And my groove object then will set the loop points. So if I go back here and select these will be the loop points that have been passed into my groove object. If I turn my loop on and play back groove, I'll actually hear I'll hear those loop points in place. I should mention that the waveform tilde object, there's a number of different settings. I'm just going to bring up my inspector. I'm going to select that and bring up my inspector. And you'll see down here where it says click mode. I've got this set to select. If it's at none, then I can't do anything in here. So if it's set to, for example, a loop, then it can take these loop points and I can move them around. Whoops. Right? But I can't edit them. I can't select the loop points. So this could also be kind of interesting in some situations. So one of the things I want to make sure is that if I'm using a waveform tilde object and I want to be able to set my loop points, that I've got this set to select. Now, the 3rd and 4th inlets to this object will set the loop points. Okay? All right. So let's look to see what we're doing in this object. Okay? I'll tell you what I'm trying to do in the object, and then it hopefully will make sense. I want to set a duration, a loop duration, and you can see that I'm setting it initially to 500, and I'm passing this all over the place. First of all, I'm figuring out, I want to randomly grab 500 milliseconds of sound here, 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 all around inside that, that recorded sound file. So the first thing I do is I say, well, what is the last point that I want to be able to start my loop at? And that is 10,000 minus 500. And that I put into this random generator. So it's going to generate something between 0 and 9,500. Okay. Then when a random number is generated, whatever that random number is, it happens every 500 milliseconds with this metro, I add 500 to it. So I have the starting loop point, and then 500 milliseconds later, I have the ending loop point. And those get put into my waveform. I also want to set, well, this is getting set in there so I know how long it is. This is also being set into the domain of this envelope. And I'll talk about that envelope in a minute. And also the speed of the metro. So I put a value of 500 in. I set everything up so that I can take slices of 500 milliseconds. And the start point is random somewhere in the file, and the end point, do it the other way around for you, start point here, end point there, and it will jump around the file. Okay? Then these values get put into the groove object, and I also randomly select a playback speed. So, but basically 0 to 99, divide it by 100, add 0.5 to it, and that's going to give me random numbers basically between 0.5 and 1.5. So that's going into the pitch shift object. That's an attribute inspector object, and then that is going into my groove. Okay? And the other thing I do with my metro is I bang the start loop. And what the start loop does is it will actually start the playback at the loop points. All right. So what's going to happen, what will happen, what should happen, and let me just go back here to point out that I need to make sure that I always have a signal tilde object attached to my groove. This groove is set up like the last one we did in the previous tutorial with at time stretch set to 1. So the pitch and the duration have been decoupled, and this will control the playback, the duration of the playback, and this will control the pitch that we hear on the playback. If I keep the signal tilde at 1, it will always play back 500 milliseconds. Okay? So I'm going to get a chunk and a chunk and a chunk and a chunk and a chunk, and it will always be 500 milliseconds regardless of what the pitch is. Finally, this envelope. The reason I bang this envelope at every, actually gets banged here somewhere. One of these goes around and bangs it. Every time I start a sample is that I'm going to be jumping around in this sound file. And all this envelope does is it just creates a little bit of a ramp at the beginnings and ends of the sound file. And that will get rid of clicks. If I don't do that, and maybe we'll try it without it just to hear, you will get clicks every time you jump from one sound file fragment to another sound file fragment. Okay. All right, so let's see if this works. I don't think I need any of these to make this work. Let's see what happens if I turn it on.
The import the intense. Okay, so
fast.
The
Import the seconds.
10 information
Second.
or
10. I'm going to
Salute to record
fascinating.
seconds. Okay, so I'm
fascinating.
Going to record incredibly seconds.
Okay, let's stop it. So it's jumping around randomly. Let's make this much shorter. Let's make it 200 milliseconds. Now what's going to happen is the little slice of time is going to be 200 milliseconds instead of 500, and this envelope has been switched, so its domain is now 200, and the metro is running at 200, so it'll sound like this.
Okay.
So I'm
So I'm
let's write it at 100 milliseconds. And of course, if we do something longer, we're going to get much more of the text coming. Whoops, I was going to do 1,000 there.
information.
Incredibly fascinating.
Incredibly fascinating of absolute.
Incredibly fascinating.
Absolutely incredibly fast.
Absolutely incredible.
10 seconds.
Incredibly. Okay, so you get the idea, and that could be any sound we put in there. If I didn't want the pitch shifting, I could also take this out, and let's say if I disconnected this one temporarily and set my pitch shift to 1.0 and put it back to 500. I'm going to record seconds of absolutely incredibly information. Fascinating seconds of, okay, I'm going to reconnect that. So it's back again. Let's disconnect this envelope for a moment, just because I want you to be able to hear what happens. I'm going to change that. I'm going to put a 1 in here, because right now it's multiplying by 0. And I'm going to run this without the envelope. And see if you can hear the clicks that occur. Incredibly
Seconds. Seconds.
Maybe in seconds. 10
Seconds of 10 seconds.
information. Information. So I information. So you can start to hear absolutely incredibly fascinating information. Yes. So you can hear the clicks, especially when there's shorter durations. You start getting these clicks every time the sample starts, and we don't like those. We don't like clicks. Okay, so let me reconnect that in here. So that's our envelope control. Excuse me. So what I'm doing here is I'm clicking on the start loop rather than the 0 to start at the beginning. I'm simply saying start playing back at the loop. So I'm not playing back, the traditional fashion of starting at the beginning and going to the loop and then looping and going to the end. I'm just saying start at the loop, and I play the loop, and then as soon as that's done, I move to a different location. I say start at the loop again. Okay, so that's just a kind of a fun little patch. It does show you how the waveform works. You'll definitely be wanting to use a waveform in your next assignment, which is dealing with recording and sampling. I would strongly recommend using Groove Tilde for that, and I would also recommend probably doing the time stretch 1, the attribute time stretch 1, because that way you can control basically the duration, the speed of playback, and the pitch. The duration of the playback and the pitch of the playback independent of one another. Okay, so that is week 9.2. Thank you.